Hi, I'm Ariam, and this clip should appear in 3 videos. So, there is this readathon called the Magical Readathon, or the Really a Readathon, that happens every April and September, which your character goes to a magical university called Aurelium. And to get there, they have to take the novice path. And to do that, you can. It's very optional, but you can do that, and I want to. Do prompts of what is on the novice path. The novice path starts from the novice path entrance. You go through the Astron Tree, the Mist of Solitude, the Ruin of the Sky, the Obsidian Falls, the Tower of Rumination, and Aurelium Academy. And I actually thought there were 6 prompts. There are 7 prompts. And I have 3 characters. So I was planning to do 2 for each character. And I'm still doing that because the Tower of Ruminations prompt is read a 5-star prediction, and that's just not really a thing I do. So I have 3 characters, Miriam, Rafaela, and Radha. Radha actually has been to Aurelium Academy anymore as like a teenager, but she had this adventure. She went to the Fae, because she grew up in Aurelium City, and she ended up in the Fae lands, and she's coming back to actually properly learn to be a Fae Wilds cartographer. But let's see. I haven't exactly decided what Miriam or Phil are learning. But let's see what prompts I'm going to do for each character, and then these will each be and then I will drop into video for each character where I choose the books for those prompts. So let's start with Miriam, because her name starts with is in alphabetical order. Her name is first. You can see this, right? Ruin of the Sky. Okay. Then her other prompt is no Mist of Solitude. Great. Now, next in alphabetical order is Radha. And we get Ash Thorn Tree. And Aurelium Academy. Very makes a lot of sense for her to get Aurelium Academy. And then finally, obviously, Rafaela gets Novice Pass entrance and Obsidian Falls. So I will see you in the videos. Okay, so for Miriam, we have Ruin of the Sky. Read a book featuring ghosts slash haunted house or other supernatural elements. And I'm planning to go with Bindle Punk Bruja by Desideria Mesa, which is a historical fantasy following Luna slash Rose, who has she has a, what do you call it? A speakeasy. And she also happens to be a witch. It's kind of reminded me of Blood Debts, the Blood Debt series, which is not historical, but I wanted to read it for this, but the third book, we don't even know what it's called or anything about it, so I don't even know if it's ever going to come out. Then, for The Mist of Solitude, the prompt is read a standalone, and for that I'm planning to read Religion for Atheists, A Non-Believer's Guide to the Uses of Religion by Elaine de Botton, which is funny because I am religious, but I was recommended this. So, yeah. Hello, it is January 28th, and I have started reading the standalone for Mist of Solitude, which is Religion for Atheists. I do not remember who it's by. 42 pages into it. I am reading it very slowly because I took it out from the e-library, and it turns out, excuse me, it turns out that you can't. What I usually do is I take books out from the e-library, download it on my Kindle, and this one you can't. You have to actually read it in the e-library, which means you need an internet connection. And I read books in the bus, so there's not always a solid internet connection, which means I'm going to have to read it at home. So, and also it's nonfiction, so I've been reading it pretty slowly. Like, I started it yesterday. I'm 42 pages in, and it starts on page like 7 or something, so it's even less pages. And look, this book is not for me, and it says it on the title. Like I believe I said in the introduction that Rabbi Sachs recommended it, and I'm an atheist, and that is true. And this book is very much for atheists. So this book is not for me, especially when and the author also says in the introduction that it's going to be Christian centered. Like he's going to talk mainly about Christianity, and he's going to mention Buddhism and Judaism, but it's mainly talking about Christianity. But another way I think it isn't for me, and I can see why it was for Rabbi Sachs and not for me, is that I am not looking, I'm not currently in a place in my life where I'm looking to take to religion for aspects of community, for aspects of things that are making my life better. I do appreciate the things in religion that make my life better, but I'm not looking for them, I'm looking for, there are other things in religion that I am looking for that are important to me. So, and Rabbi Sachs, on the other hand, I feel like that was from his articles that I've read, I feel like that was very, very important to him to find like these things in religion, not so much that were good, but were universal. Because he was the chief rabbi of Britain and or the UK, whatever, and one of the things that was very important to him in that role, and I assume before that, and that's part of the reason why he got that role, is to connect Jews with Christians and other non-Jews. So it was very important to him to find things that were universal. So I can see why he would like that book coming from there. So I guess there is only one criticism I have on the book so far, which is that very early on, in the introduction, the author writes something like that religions have this hold over all of life that no secular group has ever managed to have. Like, it's over your food, it's also over food and meals, it's also over art and music and everything in a life. And he really wants to find that in the secular thing. And the thing is, I personally think that's impossible because the reason religion is able to do that, is able to influence art and music and food and all of this stuff. Wait, sorry, I got his quote wrong. His quote is that religions have influenced art and music and all the things that are in a life, and there's no secular group that's been able to influence like all of these vast many things. And I don't think that a secular group is going to be able to do that, just because religion is like so wholly part of your life in every single aspect. It isn't just a side part, it's like a main part of your life in every single aspect. Whereas I don't really see any secular group that is going to be able to have that same hold over you without either turning into a cult, something bad, or a religion. So yeah, so that's my criticism. Other than that, I don't have any criticisms. I am definitely finding it an interesting read, and it's making me think, and I'm highlighting a lot. I definitely disagree with the author about a lot of things, but it's good, as I've mentioned before on this channel, wow. Anyways, as I mentioned before on this channel, I think it is good to read things that you disagree with sometimes. Hello, good evening. It is January 31st, and I am now 99 pages into Atheist for Religions, which is by Alain de Botton. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm totally not sure. He's British, but he has a French name, but he's also Jewish. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but I am enjoying it much more. I did have to stop because it was just like a lot to think about, but I am beginning to see how it's more relevant to me. First of all, it is a philosophy book, and as I've mentioned before on the channel, whether you agree with the philosophy or not, I always think there's a lot to learn. This is not centered. It's kind of annoying me. Is this better? Anyways, there's always a lot to learn from philosophy books just because it's something that makes you think. and respond. So while obviously there are stuff I agree with, a lot of stuff I don't agree with, I think it's actually kind of 50-50 for whether I agree with him or not, which is interesting. There is a philosophy book. Both of those things make you think. I do have some criticisms. This book is, it said this in the beginning, but I still think it's valid as a criticism, that it jumps between the religions, and in that case, it is very shallow and not always accurate. And yes, it did say in the beginning that it would do this, but I do think it is still a valid criticism of what I do dislike about it. One of the things I am liking about it is I grew up in a Jewish world. Obviously, I grew up in Israel. I left. I did live in America for a little while, but I left it before. Excuse me. I really had a sense of its culture, and while I have read a lot of books by Christian authors who have put in a lot of heavy-handed Christian themes, I have a very vague idea of what Christianity honestly really is. And while this is very shallow, because it's taking like stuff that it likes, while there's some stuff that I still don't like that it's taking that the author likes, there are some stuff that I'm like, oh, I can see how that works more now. Like, it was talking about saints, and Judaism is very against saints in general. And there are a lot of reasons I still agree with that. But it was talking about certain aspects of saints, of looking at them as people to like be like, basically how people say, you see, I don't know if it's real or if people actually do this, but I have seen on the internet, people are like, what would Jesus do, right? So basically, you're in the middle of a fight with your wife, it says, and then you see the statue of a saint, and you're like, okay, what would St. Francis do? And I do understand that, because that is definitely something that I think is a good thing of religion, not specifically in saints, because that's kind of idolatrous in my opinion. Um, but I do feel like that's something that religion has given me. And to see it from the perspective of like, okay, I'm in this situation and this is my normal human interpretation and this is my morality and this is what religion is telling me, okay? Which can, whatever. But to see first like that perspective on saints. And again, this is very shallow and not always accurate, so I don't know if it's true, but I really like seeing that perspective on saints. Hey, it is January, it's February 2nd, and I am on page 162 of Atheist Religion for Atheists. I am definitely coming across more parts that I disagree with. Like, he's definitely taking a lot of stuff from Christianity, and then I'm just like, no, I think you're wrong about this. There were definitely other parts where he was taking stuff, and I was like, I disagree with you about this, but it's becoming more and more. Especially think it wasn't like all the last chapter, but a lot of the stuff they were talking about in the last chapter were stuff I disagreed with. And I specifically mentioned Christianity just because um, he based that last chapter a lot supposedly on Christianity. Like I said, from what I can see in general using my brain, and from what I know about what he's written about Judaism, and I obviously know a lot about Judaism, not as much as I could know, but I do know a lot. I do see that as more shallow. So, like, I don't want to say, oh, this is really what Christianity is, what he's describing, and what he's taking from. But I do see, I personally do disagree with a lot of that chapter, of what he was basing his ideas on. And because it's about education, which is a topic that I'm very passionate about, I found it much harder to stay neutral and be like, is it written well? Are the ideas presented well? So that's where I am. Actually, that the last chapter? No, the last two chapters. That one was about education, and then the next chapter after that. So the chapter before the last chapter I read was about education, and the last chapter I read was very short, and it was about tenderness. And again, it really just, and this one I was also able to feel more neutral about. And whilst I disagreed with a lot of stuff because I very much viewed it as idolatry, and obviously I said I'm not atheist and I am Jewish, so idolatry is not for me. But it does, I've always understood, I feel like the second I started, like, not as a child, right? Not as a child where you're like, what? People pray to statues? But like as I got older, even as a teenager, I've always understood the pull towards idolatry. And I think that he definitely described it very, very well. And while I disagree with him because on a religious level, because I am religious, I really, I think that he did write that chapter well. I also disagreed with his conclusions. However, I do not think he wrote his conclusions well. There's often a thing where I'll come across in books like or essays like these where you'll have like this is the idea and this is what I take from it. And I'm like, and a lot of the times it'll be like, how are we going to do that? And actually, that's not such an issue in this book because well, it is part. Well, there is an issue in like how are you going to get everyone to do it? But because I feel like sometimes you're like, oh, we need everyone to do this. Like that was another big thing in the education chapter. Was like we need everyone to do this, and like okay. But however, he also says I think he also recognizes that he is not planning to change everyone's minds, and while he will like mention something that would be like a big thing, he's he does when he talks about practicalities, he does talk about stuff that are like more individual or at least they're smaller, like a restaurant or a museum, rather than putting giant billboards in the middle of Times Square. Which and I feel like also about the education chapter, there were much more of these bigger ideas in this education chapter, university, and we're going to get back to the education chapter as well because I want to talk about it a little bit. But universities and big billboards, whereas the other chapters were smaller and more practical. So for the most part, that doesn't actually bother me. What does is, the tenderness chapter at the very least. I was like, how how did you get from this idea to that idea? And I feel like this part of my brain is like maybe that's because it's part of my brain that's like I don't want to be part of idolatry, so I'm like walking, so I'm like walling myself off from like how did you get to this idea? Um, however, no, it's not like how did he get to the idea. I get the concept of how he got to the idea. However, I'm wondering. I am wondering like how he would sell his idea. Oh, I guess it is the practicalities that were bothering me in that. There were other things I was like, okay, I get how you're selling it. And this one I was kind of like, you haven't convinced me. You know? Like I can read all this and agree with you, and then you give this idea, I'm like, I don't know about that. So, but that just might be personally me. Now let's get back to the education chapter because even though I disagreed with a lot of what it was based on, I still found it interesting because he was talking a lot about so I don't know if there's this concept in English, but in Hebrew we have a concept of hora'ah and chinuch. And I do believe in English Hebrew translated to education, but in Hebrew it's essentially two different things. Hora'ah is the very basics of teaching, right? It's like I have a subject and I'm going to make people know about the subject. You know, I teach in math, so these kids are going to know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I teach in English, so these kids are going to know that tapuach is apple. Okay? And then there's chinuch. And chinuch is everything else that is happens in education, whether it's with teachers, parents, um, leaders in a youth group, basically everywhere that kids are, right? So it's about manners, it's about um, learning values. It's like, and obviously everyone takes part who's involved in a child's life, takes part in chinuch in one way or another. And you can be a teacher who wants to only do hora'ah, but if you only do hora'ah, then you are a bad teacher. Now, what's interesting and up until now, I think he and I very much agree with each other. Now, what's interesting about his perspective is that the education chapter was not about elementary, middle, or even high schools, because I think he knows that everyone does agree, even if the words of the concepts don't exist in English, the line between chinuch and hora'ah, they do agree that this needs to be taught to kids. So what was he talking about? He was talking about universities. And I do think he made some good points in that there is, and I've noticed, I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately, actually. Um, but there is like this thing where universities, not in Israel, actually, but definitely in, or at least I don't think in Israel. I have personally not seen it, but definitely in America, you'll see like all these graduation speeches and they'll be like, oh, we have learned so much to give to the world. And you're like, that's not really what university teaches, right? Like that's something that's definitely taught in elementary, in like, in, how do you call it? Preschool to high school, right? Definitely all these values and stuff are taught. Then university, it's not really a thing that's taught, right? University is very, very academic. It's a totally different environment. And while high school does prepare you in some ways for university, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a bridge between that aspect that was, while it was Hara Hora'ah, it was very focused on chinuch, to university, which is only Hora'ah. So, but still, university is like just fully Hora'ah in a manner that no other place of education that I had ever been in before, either as someone who was being educated or as an educator aspect, have ever experienced before, right? And our author Elaine is writing that this is true everywhere, and he wants to change it. And I did think, and anyways, my whole point is that it really made me think, because at first my knee-jerk reaction was that's what universities are for. Once you were supposed to learn all that in your education as a child and a teenager. By the time you're an adult, never mind that I always forget that outside of Israel, people are going to university at like 18, 19 and not in their, and not 22, 23. But my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, but that's not what universities are for. And I do think, and I do disagree with him about some things. Like he was talking about, oh, there are the professionals, and and he definitely did not talk about people learning to become teachers in university, which I think is very, like, and I think he skipped it on purpose because he didn't have enough to talk about that. Because like at most he was talking about the medical professionals, and like, how can you kind of be like, he was kind of being dismissive of professionals, like professional stuff taught in universities rather than the humanities. That's what he was comparing, and he mentioned medical professionals, and he was kind of dismissive about all professionals, and like, how can you be dismissive of medical professionals? I'm not saying, obviously, that every medical professional is good. I have met some bad ones. Um, but overall, like, and there are horrible teachers. Like, obviously, there's going to be horrible people in every profession, but it's like, you can't just dismiss it, you know? Not to mention that both in education and medical stuff, there is an aspect of chinuch being taught, especially in education, obviously. But back to what I was saying, he was, so he was basically saying we need to continue teaching values. And beyond that age. And on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I believe in lifelong learning, which includes thinking about your values, reviewing them. And again, I am thinking about this from a perspective of someone in Israel, where people are usually going to university at ages of 22, 23, even 24, versus in America, where people, and most of the rest of the world, where people are going to university at 18, 19, maybe even 17, right? So I feel like that makes your values much more established. Obviously, people do have values very established, 18, 19 in general, but like I feel like your values are even more established, at like 23, 24. And definitely I feel like you should be reviewing your values all the time and thinking about why you value stuff and looking at them all the time, just because if you don't, you will stagnate. On the other hand, I'm like, by the time you get to be an adult and you want to go to university to learn something, okay? And again, I'm also coming from this as a person who does not believe in not becoming a professional. I believe you should learn what you love, but you need to do something to help the world with it, okay? I'm a very strong believer in that. I was talking about this also as well literally just yesterday. Not connected to this book. That was before I read this chapter. Uh, so yeah, so there are definitely people who are going to have a totally different perspective of me because they're not going to come at it with that opinion. But I think like when you're an adult and you're going to university, and this is true for high school as well. Like I know in most places, also in Israel, you just go to high school that's nearest to you. However, in the religious community where I grew up, there are a lot of high schools and you will go and interview and you will see what their values are, and you will choose high school very often based on values. Obviously, not only I chose my high school based on where my friends were going, basically, um, but we definitely in eighth grade, as we were choosing high schools, we were talking about the values that those high schools were showing us and what we saw. And so if people already have the ability to do that when they're 13, 14, they definitely have the ability to do that at, yes, 17, 18. And but there's and I'm also coming at this from someone who lives in a country where there aren't that many options for university, right? So maybe if you're in the U.S., this guy's actually in the U.K., but if you're in the U.S. or the U.K., which are bigger countries than Israel, have a lot more options, then maybe yes, this. I know there are universities who have certain values, right? And people choose to go to them because they agree with those values. And wow, I've been talking for so long. It's 8:51. But like he I feel like you're coming to learn a profession and you've already got pretty much settled what your values are going to be. I and on the other hand, I want to say, oh, maybe there should be some place for debate because debate's great. It helps you settle your values, and that's a value for me, right? I like debate. I value debate. So that's interesting. But on the other hand, we have seen after October 7th how these university students act. And I don't know if it's because they don't have values or they have values and are not and have been taken in by propaganda, or they have values that include hating Jews. I don't know. So I don't really have an answer to this one. Okay. Hello, it is February 4th. Look how sunny it is. I mean, obviously, I want it to rain, but it rained yesterday. So it's sunny. Definitely one of the days where I'm thinking like maybe I should straighten my hair because I just did my hair and it's so long and heavy and ow. Um, but anyways, getting to the book. I am now 232 pages into it, so I'm like 30 pages from the end, and honestly, it's going downhill. Besides a quick little sentence of anti-Semitism, of internalized anti-Semitism, um, it's just getting to the point where I'm like laughing at his ideas. And I think that all goes back to what I said at the beginning, where he has this idea, he sees that religions have impact on every part of life. And he doesn't realize why it happens to them and not to secular um, ideas, secular sex. And then I want to add something that I didn't say then, and I should have, and that is that he also doesn't realize how culture and religion are so entwined. Like he realizes that culture and religion are so entwined, but he doesn't realize that culture without religion is still culture. Like American culture is not, let's say, it's not ultimately religious. It does have a lot of stuff of Christianity in it. It's heavily influenced by Christianity, but it's not a Christian culture, right? Um, but it's still a culture, and obviously a culture is going to impact every part of your life. Like the last chapters I was reading, last two chapters were about art and architecture. And obviously, modern culture is going to influence art and architecture. And so it almost feels like, and there's some ideas I agree with and some I don't, but it almost feels like he's missing the point. Like, you know that meme where it's like the point, like, bing, you? That's what it feels like that is happening. Like he's concentrating, focusing on very small, on overall small details of how museums are set up and stuff like that. And he's missing the, and he's, I guess, what making me laugh, I guess, is that he ultimately seems to want to like change a whole culture, which obviously is hard enough. Which is funny enough in and of itself with how hard it would be to do it, especially in the way that he's trying to go about it. And also, wait one moment, my legs hurt. That's better. And at the same time, what was I saying? Yeah, he's focusing on stuff that are an impact of the culture rather than the culture itself. Also, yes, our man, who is Jewish but did not grow up Jewish, which means because he grew up in the UK, he grew up culturally Christian. And so he doesn't seem, despite the fact that the book is mostly based on Christianity, he doesn't seem to realize that his values are Christian. Like, he'll like, what is it, Toby? And the more you read it, the more you see how much is true. Like that, even when he's talking about even when he mentions Judaism and Buddhism, he is really focused on his values, and he seems to believe that these are like the universal values. Obviously, I suppose he wouldn't write a book like this if he didn't believe that these were the universal values, and they are so Christian. And there, as I said, there are ones that I agree with and ones that I disagree with. But the fact that he doesn't realize that they're Christian and he's viewing the world through a culturally Christian lens, and then he wrote this kind of book, is humorous. That's what I can say. Hey, it is February 6th. Yesterday I read the last 30 pages of Religion for Atheists. I don't really have anything more to say than what I said. I think I basically, there's nothing really to sum up. I, I'm still in my opinion that basically he is so much in his own worldview that he was not able to leave that worldview. And so it's not a good book. It's not a good philosophy book if you can't leave your own worldview. Specifically when you're talking, excuse me, specifically like when you're talking about picking up other people's worldviews, but you can't leave your own. Like there is kind of some grace in it, and that he said that the book was mainly going to be about Christianity, and he clearly has a culturally Christian worldview. But yeah, so overall, I don't think the idea of it is bad. Also, just so you know, that isn't tissues. That's the mask and gloves. PP. That's PPE. Okay, that's PPE in the background next to my mirror. That's PPE. That's not tissues or dirty tissues or anything. So yes, I don't think the idea of the book is bad, and I think that he did have some interesting things to say. But overall, I think the book could have used a lot more thought. Morning. I don't remember if I told you that in the end for the supernatural prompt, I'm changing to the spell quotes by Diana Wynne Jones. This is technically third in the series, but like a lot of Diana Wynne Jones series, it um it kind of, none of the books connect directly, so you don't have to actually, well, it's definitely better to read the books in order. You don't actually have to read them in order. I have read them in order, so but, so that's not relevant even. But this one is, the other two books did take place at around the same time. This one happens hundreds, if not thousands, of years earlier. So we're following a girl on the same continent as the other books, right? But I think it's thousands of years because it seems to have changed also the continent, or maybe we're just looking at a different part of the continent. Excuse me. Look at that, it's 6:21. Great. Um, and anyways, I'm only 23 pages in, so I don't know how much. So I don't really know what's going on, but I can. Excuse me. I can tell you that it's a little different from the other books. This one is written from perspective of the from first person movie, while other books were third person. And so while all the books were telling us their perspective, I would say especially it's the last one. It was a lot also about perspective and like what each person sees. One, we definitely have an unreliable narrator. Like we don't really know. Like we can tell that she's telling us stuff from her own perspective. And it's just that, like it's really just her own perspective. And we can and it's just so obvious it's her own perspective and there's probably more stuff going on, but we don't know about that yet. But again, I'm only I think I might have put in too many spices in that tuna. um we're at only 23 pages, so we'll see how it develops. I assume that like a lot of Diana Wynne Jones books, I guess I didn't really realize this until now, but it's true. A lot of Diana Wynne Jones books are like the answer is you were only looking at one perspective and it was wrong all along because you were only looking at one perspective. February 26th, and I'm now 90 pages into what's it called? The spell codes. It's definitely very different, and it's definitely the supernatural things have started to happen now that I'm more than like 23 pages I said I was in it. So we are definitely having the supernatural things happen. What is interesting is that we actually is our main character and her perspective. She is very different from a lot of Diana Wynne Jones's characters in that she is very skeptical. I feel like a lot of her characters are all like, "Oh yeah, magic. I believe in magic. Sure, of course there's magic." Or they live in a world where there obviously is magic, but she's very skeptical. She doesn't necessarily believe in magic. She isn't totally sure about believing in the gods, which in this world is obviously the gods and magic are like the same thing, right? And so, and because of that, and because magic is real in this world, her perspective is actually limited. And what's more, her older sister does believe in magic and she knows a lot more, but our main character doesn't like her older sister. She loves her, obviously, but she doesn't like her. Everything she admires is like the opposite of what her older sister is, and so she loses out on a lot of information like that. Also, her older sister and a different character really remind me of Fire and Hemlock, Polly and Tamlin from Fire and Hemlock. So the plot is also like moving with this river. They're always on this river, and the plot is moving with this river. Oh, another thing that is interesting is that as she's writing essentially this story, our main character is writing this story, it doesn't feel done. Like from the very beginning, she says that they end up basically from where they started from, but in an old mill, and they're like still hiding from these people who want to kill them, or at least it seems that they might be hiding. Maybe all those people are dead now. I don't know. But it definitely seems like the story isn't totally over. I do know that there was a fourth book, and I've seen it said that like it wraps everything up. So I wonder if this book will have a looser end than most of Diana Wynne Jones's books do. It is February 27th. I am 178 pages through the spell codes, which means I have like 98 pages left in the book. And so first of all, it turns out there are two parts of this book. The first part did end in the middle of the story. Like I said, it very much seemed like she was in the middle of the story still when she was telling us about the mill. The second part picks up from that. She's still in the mill, but she's writing as the events go on. So definitely an interesting structure. I don't really have any feelings about it one way or the other. It's not a usual structure, but I don't love it and I don't hate it. I don't like it, I don't dislike it. It's fine. Uh, the story itself, what I think about the book, has been really up and down, but partially, that's at least partially been because of my emotional state. I do think there are parts that have been like a little slower and stuff, or maybe like I was enjoying them and then it was like went on for a little too long. But also I've just been like, but it's also like been my own emotional state that's like been up and down. So which I think has definitely like influenced. Am I going to be interested in this book at the moment? I am interested in this book at the moment. Uh, yep, that's it. Hey, I just finished the spell codes. I think I talked to you this morning. It's the 27th, right? I just finished the spell codes, and yeah, that was so good. It obviously did not finish um, at the very end of the story. Like, it left some undone, and I actually think that that was a better choice than Diana Wynne Jones usually makes. Um, because the ending of the story that we know is going to happen is still all that big upheaval that Diana Wynne Jones usually does. But I think it was actually better to kind of leave it, and this is what is going to happen. Obviously, because um, of the way the story is told through these coats that are being woven. Also, there was a little end note that was like from like the people in the future, like we found these coats and these figures are related to these figures in our folk tales, and that is so fun. I love it when it happens. I also really, in the end, I told you this morning that I was neutral on the way the story is built. I decided that I actually really, really love it because obviously this whole story surrounds this river. I'm trying, and they're constantly traveling on the river, and the story matches like the river. Like when the story gets slow is when the river is slow. And I did not, as I said before, I didn't really like it when it was slow, but I love how much the story and like and the fact that when there's a pause when she's stopping the first coat and starting the second is like the only time in the story that they're paused and not moving. Absolutely love it. I think this is definitely my favorite in the series so far. There is one more in the series. It's a quartet, but I doubt that it will be my favorite. This one, because this one is not only just one of my favorites in the series, I believe it's one of my favorite Diana Wynne Jones books in general, which is very surprising because it's not like her other books that I've liked. Like I said, it reminded me more of Fire and Hemlock, which and even oh my gosh, what's that book called? Another one, which Fire and Hemlock. I liked it. It was fine, but it was like it didn't feel like oh my god, I love this, and I really really like this book. Uh, yeah, I feel like Fire and Hemlock should have been further fleshed out, um, and that would have helped it come to really because I liked Fire and Hemlock. There were a lot of things I liked in it, but this is not a blog about Fire and Hemlock. This is about the spell coats, and so yeah, I really like the spell coats. And I'm very happy about really liking it, as you can see. It's funny, isn't it? How you can be happy so much about liking a book or a TV show or something that isn't actually real. But it is real because it's in your brain. And your brain, like, nothing's real, you know? Like, everything I'm interpreting with my brain. Anyways, that's the sun. That's the whole novice path done for my characters. And in April, I suppose, I will, with God's help, I will start the new semester and their first year for all three of them.